They told her she didn't belong. They dismissed her as just an intern. They didn't know she held the power to change everything. When a quiet woman walks into City Hall, no one expects the walls to shift. But what happens when the woman you overlook is the one sent to oversee you? This is the true-to-life inspired story of Maya Channing, an undercover federal investigator who walked into a broken system and made it listen. Not with shouts, but with silence that carried weight. If you believe change starts with those who dare to stay silent until it matters most, watch to the end. Because this isn't just about one woman, it's about every one of us who's been told to wait, to sit down, to be patient, and what happens when we finally decide to stand. They said City Hall was the heart of the community, but sometimes it beat a little too quietly. The municipal office in Dunsmore, a small Midwestern town surrounded by cornfields and Monday morning routines, didn't seem like the kind of place where revolutions began. The building itself was plain, faded brick, a chipped sign and the smell of reheated coffee lingering in the hallways like old news. Clerks shuffled papers, phones rang, and a printer somewhere always jammed at the worst possible time. Everyone had their role, everyone knew their place. Until the day Maya Thompson walked through the front doors. No press, no big welcome. Just a quiet nod from the security guard and the soft squeak of rubber soles against tile. She wore a slate-gray cardigan over a navy blouse, black jeans, and a satchel, slung crosswise over her shoulder. Nothing about her said authority. Nothing about her said threat. She signed in at the visitor desk, a new intern, temporary afterthought, or so they thought. Rick Carlson, the municipal supervisor for over 2 decades, was in the break room when she arrived. He glanced up from his cup of coffee, noted the unfamiliar face, then went back to stirring in his sugar. Another newbie, he muttered to a colleague. Let's see if she lasts longer than the last one. The last one had made it 6 weeks. Maya, they didn't know, wasn't here to file forms or fetch coffee. She wasn't here to learn the ropes. She was here to see what the ropes were made of. Every morning, she arrived early. Every evening, she left late. She smiled when spoken to. She took notes during meetings. She nodded when dismissed. But behind her soft demeanor was something sharper, a stillness with edges. People often mistook her quiet for inexperience. They didn't know she had once taught seminars on implicit bias under a different name. They didn't know she held a law degree from Howard and had helped write 2 state-level workplace equity guidelines. They didn't know she had spent the last 3 years working undercover for the Department of Labor. They only saw a woman who didn't speak much, and that, she had learned, was often the best way to hear everything. The first few days were a blur of introductions and awkward smiles. People asked where she went to school. She answered vaguely. People asked what she hoped to learn. She said, whatever I can. They asked if she was local. She wasn't. But she didn't say that out loud, because the less they knew, the more they revealed. There was Mary, the front desk clerk, who had a habit of giving short answers to callers with accents. There was Paul, the assistant administrator, who always forgot to copy the only Latino team member on email threads. And of course, there was Rick, who didn't raise his voice but didn't have to. He had a way of dismissing ideas with a smile and complimenting competence like it was a surprise. Not bad for someone so young, he once told Maya while reviewing a report she'd helped draft. She said thank you. But inside she filed the comment where it belonged, under patterns, not praise. By Friday of her first week she'd already filled half a notebook, names, times, phrases, a dozen red flags wrapped in pleasantries, because Maya wasn't just watching for the big things. She was watching for the small ones, the things that added up, the things that didn't make headlines but broke people slowly. She knew the story she was looking for wouldn't come all at once. It would come in fragments, in glances, in the silence between sentences, and when it did, it would not knock. It would simply sit across the room like truth wearing a name tag, and that she was ready for. She always had been. Every building has blind spots. In Dunsmore City Hall it was the records room, a windowless space tucked behind the finance department, lined with metal cabinets and lit by fluorescent bulbs that buzzed like secrets. Maya liked it there. No one paid much attention to the intern who liked paper files. While others tapped on keyboards, She traced case histories with her fingers, digging through years of employee evaluations, incident logs, and departmental memos. Some patterns showed up: early terminations without cause, reviews with language like cultural mismatch and difficulty integrating, always the same kinds of employees, always the same departments. One file in particular stopped her cold. Jamal Reyes, former zoning clerk, terminated 2 years ago after consistent tardiness, but a sticky note in a margin said otherwise. Raised issue about misallocated grant funds, dismissed for being combative. Combative, Maya had learned, was code, like unprofessional, or not a team player. The kind of words that papered over real concerns when they came from the wrong kind of mouth. She made copies, tucked them away. Each folder, each whisper of ink on paper, was a piece of the story she was building. The janitor, an older man named Enoch, noticed her one evening as she packed up late. "You read more than anyone else in this place," he said. With a half smile, she looked up, returning the smile gently. "Just trying to understand." Enoch paused, wiped his hands on his towel. "Understanding gets heavy. Hope you got strong shoulders, Miss Maya." She did. She carried more than paper. She carried the weight of patterns, and she wasn't done counting yet. That weekend, she returned with a flash drive, a portable scanner, and a plan. No one questioned her presence anymore. She had blended in. Maya spent hours digitizing files, cross-referencing case dates, and comparing language used in memos from different supervisors. There was one more file she copied before leaving that night. Lucinda Kim, former assistant planner. Her file was clean. Almost too clean. No exit interview. No performance reviews. Just a note in the HR memo. Left for personal reasons. But Maya found a forwarded email thread that told a different story. Lucinda had submitted a complaint about Rick Carlson weeks before her departure. It was never formally logged, never responded to. Maya saved the email with a quiet click, labeled it buried. And then she sat back, closed her eyes, and listened to the building. Sometimes a place tells its story not in what's said, but in what it hides. And Maya was learning to hear everything it didn't want to tell. It happened on a Tuesday, the kind of Tuesday no one remembers. Cloudy sky, sluggish air, and too many coffee cups piling up on desks. The break room smelled like burnt toast and borrowed time. Rick Carlson stood near the copier, waiting for a report to print, tapping the edge of his mug like it owed him something. Maya entered with her usual quiet pace, a clipboard in one hand, a calm look in her eyes. She wasn't looking for trouble. But sometimes, trouble finds you when you're too still to miss it. Rick turned, saw her, and nodded. "Still here," he said with a half grin. Thought interns rotated out faster than office chairs. Maya smiled politely. "I like learning the full picture." He raised an eyebrow. "Well, just don't get too comfortable. Some of us have been here long enough to know comfort's overrated." She nodded again, then walked past him, but something in her tone lingered longer than her steps. That afternoon, the department held a planning session in the main conference room. Everyone was there. Rick at the head of the table, arms crossed, voice projecting like it had something to prove. They were reviewing project timelines, budget allocations, community complaints. When Maya spoke up, it was about a grant report from 3 years ago, one that didn't match the numbers in the official ledger. The room went still. Rick blinked, then chuckled. "Those are old numbers, and that report was handled. Probably just a clerical thing." Maya didn't flinch. The original submission lists 1 recipient, but the dispersal ledger shows 2. Rick's jaw tightened. "We don't need to revisit old paperwork." "It's not your place anyway." She met his gaze, level and unwavering. "With respect, Mr. Carlson, if a discrepancy involved public funds, it's everyone's place." A low murmur ran across the table. Someone coughed. Someone else stopped typing. Rick leaned back in his chair. "You know, you've got a good head on your shoulders, Maya, but maybe spend a little less time playing detective and a little more time staying in your lane." And just like that, the room shifted. Lines were drawn, the air was heavier. Maya closed her folder quietly. "Thank you for the feedback." She stood up, walked out. No raised voice, no dramatic exit. Just silence, like a gavel you don't hear but still feel in your ribs. Back at her desk, Maya sat still for a long time. She reviewed the copies again. Triple-checked her notes. This wasn't just about ego. It wasn't even just about Rick. It was about the story this building told when no one thought it had an audience. That night, Enoch found her again. "You all right, Miss Maya?" She looked up, a little wearier than before. Truth makes people uncomfortable. Enoch nodded, wiping down a counter with a slow rhythm. "So does change. But it don't mean you stop swinging." She smiled, just slightly. The next morning, Rick avoided her. So did a few others. But one person from HR left a sticky note on her desk. "Check the 2018 staff reviews. Look for M. Ruiz, no signature. Just the kind of breadcrumb people leave when they're not ready to speak but can't stay quiet either." Maya followed it. And what she found would become the turning point in a story that was just starting to burn. But that would come later. For now, she documented, connected dots, and waited. Because change doesn't always start with noise. Sometimes it starts with a question asked in a room full of people, a little too eager to move on. Maya didn't return to her desk the next morning. Instead, she walked 3 blocks down to a cafe with poor lighting and good privacy, a corner booth with a back-facing seat. She opened her laptop, plugged in the flash drive, and began assembling. Everything, 3 years' worth of files, personnel memos, anonymized complaints, financial anomalies. It was more than just scattered data now, it was a pattern. And patterns, Maya knew, don't lie. They whisper, then they speak, then they shout. By noon, she submitted her first formal memo to her supervisor at the Department of Labor, encrypted, secure, labeled, potential systemic discrimination and financial misappropriation, preliminary findings. She signed it not as Maya Thompson, intern, but as Senior Compliance Investigator, Federal Division. Her real name, Maya L. Channing. Back at City Hall, Rick Carlson was still chuckling over yesterday's intern drama. He had no idea what had just landed in a government inbox across the state. That afternoon, a call came through to the Office of Municipal Oversight. Anonymous tip, female voice, brief message. "You've got a storm coming, and it's already inside the building." The cool voice was disguised. But the message wasn't. Maya knew the playbook. She'd written parts of it, expose lightly, collect, corroborate, then press. She didn't want Rick fired. Not yet. She wanted the system around him to admit he wasn't an outlier. He was the product. That night, Enoch stayed late. So did she. He watched her pack up and finally asked, "Who are you really?" Maya looked at him, not surprised. Someone who's been quiet long enough. He didn't press. Instead, he walked away, and before turning the corner said, "Well, it's about time someone brought a flashlight to this basement." Maya smiled, then opened one more folder from the HR archive. M. Ruiz, Melissa Ruiz, had been a rising analyst. 3 promotions in 5 years, and then nothing. Her review in 2018 mentioned team dissonance and poor fit. But attached to the file was an unsigned email complaint. Subject line, inappropriate conduct, supervisor bias. The body of the message had been blacked out, marked as privileged. But Maya found the backup email server, found the original. Melissa had documented specific instances, being excluded from budget meetings, public belittlement, and a repeated remark from Rick. "Let's not turn this into a diversity exercise. We've got numbers to meet, not feelings." Maya read the line 3 times, then printed it, not because she needed proof, but because she needed the silence it brought to mean something. The following morning, she met with the city's ethics review. Liaison, she didn't go as Maya the intern. She went as Maya L. Channing, investigator, presented her badge. Her file, her findings. The man across the desk blinked twice, then read every page slower with each turn. When he looked up, his voice was quiet. This will change things." Maya didn't smile, didn't nod. She simply said, "It's time." Because silence had done enough. Now, it was time to speak. The letterhead on the summons was unmistakable. City of Dunsmore, Office of Municipal Oversight. Rick Carlson unfolded the envelope like it might explode. Request for administrative interview was printed across the top in bold. The kind of bold that doesn't ask, it commands. He read it twice, then again. The date was in 2 days. The room, Conference 3A. The listed facilitator, M.L. Channing. His coffee went cold before he even blinked. That afternoon, the office was quieter than usual. Whispers passed like wind between cubicles. Eyes darted away when Rick walked by. Someone had taped a new flyer by the staff microwave. Know your rights, reporting retaliation. No one claimed responsibility, but no one tore it down either. Rick didn't ask questions. He just pulled it off the wall, folded it in half, and tossed it in the trash. Thursday arrived like thunder in slow motion. Rick wore his best jacket, polished his shoes, straightened his tie 4 times before leaving the house. He walked into Conference 3A and found Maya already seated. She didn't stand when he entered, didn't offer her hand. Her badge sat calmly on the table, her eyes clear and still. There were 3 others in the room, 2 compliance officers and 1 legal liaison from the state. Maya opened a folder, spoke without raising her voice. Mr. Carlson, we're here to review allegations pertaining to unethical conduct, discriminatory treatment, and potential misappropriation of funds during your tenure. Rick exhaled slowly. Allegations? He glanced at the others, but they didn't look back. Maya continued. This is not a criminal trial. It's a procedural audit, but it carries consequences. Policy, pay, and possibly your position. She slid a stack of documents forward. Typed statements, financial records, transcripts, highlighted passages that looked like they might burn the page. Rick tried to keep calm. This is political, he said. Someone's got an agenda. Someone's gunning for me. Maya didn't respond to the deflection. She tapped one file. This is from your email account sent March 22nd. Do you recall referring to a staff meeting as a diversity circus? Silence. Rick stared at the page, then at her. Taken out of context, he muttered. The compliance officer leaned forward. You were the context. Maya waited. Waited until the silence wasn't just awkward. It was loud. Then she said, This building has operated too long on what it could excuse, not what it could justify. Rick leaned back, crossed his arms, uncrossed them, then said, So what now? You write me up? Hang me in the lobby as an example? Maya folded her hands. Calm, measured. No, we follow due process. But make no mistake, this isn't about one man. It's about a culture, one that's ending, starting today. Rick stared at her, long and hard. But he said nothing more. When he left that room, his steps were slower, not because of age, because of weight. Down the hallway, people watched him pass. But no one smiled, not out of cruelty, out of clarity. Maya stayed behind, reviewed the tapes, filed the signed statements, marked one folder, pending action, because reckoning wasn't noise, it was paperwork, it was silence, it was change, and change had a name now. Maya L. Channing, the intern who wasn't, the voice who waited, and the reason the doors at City Hall finally began to creak open. The Monday after the hearing, Rick Carlson's office was quiet, too quiet. The blinds stayed drawn, the inbox stayed full, and Rick, for the first time in years, didn't open his email before 9 a.m. In the break room, no one talked about what happened, but no one needed to. Change had a scent, like fresh paint and turned pages. Maya walked in just after 9. She wasn't carrying folders anymore, just a coffee in one hand and her badge in the other. People looked up. Some smiled. Some nodded. One even stood. It was Eliza, a junior clerk who had always stayed out of the spotlight. She walked straight to Maya, voice low but clear. Thank you. Maya didn't ask for what. She just returned the nod, then walked on. In HR, a new bulletin board was installed. A simple sign read, Equity, Access, Accountability. Beneath it, information on workplace mediation, ethics training dates, and anonymous feedback protocols. Enoch passed Maya in the hall, pushing his mop cart with steady rhythm. Looks like the floor's not the only thing getting scrubbed, he said with a chuckle. Maya laughed. real this time. Because sometimes healing sounds like a joke told between two people who understand what silence used to cost. Later that week, Rick submitted a request for early retirement. No fanfare. No speeches, just a folded letter and a paperclip holding 2 decades in place. Maya reviewed it, signed it, and walked it down herself to the clerk's office. When she handed it over, the clerk raised an eyebrow. "You sure you want to be the one to file this?" Maya smiled. "Yes, I think I earned the honor." That afternoon she sat in the same seat where her story started, third desk by the window. This time she wasn't writing observations. She was writing policy, a draft outline for new onboarding procedures, bias training integrations, whistleblower protections. She paused for a moment, looked out the window. The town moved at its same slow pace. But something inside had shifted, and, not just in the building, in the people. Eliza started volunteering to lead staff meetings. Paul, the assistant administrator, requested to attend implicit bias training on his own. Even Mary from the front desk started answering calls with a new tone, less guarded, more human. Maya kept her presence quiet. She didn't want applause. She wanted change that stayed after she left. She got it. Weeks passed, then months, and one day Maya packed up her desk. A young woman walked in to take her spot. New intern, bright eyes, nervous hands. Maya shook her hand. Held it just long enough. "Ask questions," she said, "even the quiet ones." Then she left. No press, no applause, just a door swinging slowly shut on a place that finally remembered what justice should feel like. Because reform doesn't end with a ruling. It begins when someone stays to rebuild. It didn't take long for the story to stretch beyond Dunsmore. Not because of press releases, not because of headlines, but because someone in the courtroom that day had recorded Maya's quiet stand. The moment she asked a question and was told to stay in her lane, the moment she stood anyway. That clip hit a local blog, then a state advocacy page. By the end of the week, it had 200,000 views. By the end of the month, people in cities Maya had never visited were asking, "Who is she?" And more importantly, "Where do we find more like her?" Because it wasn't the volume of her voice. It was the weight of her stillness. Educators began sharing the video in classrooms. Activists clipped the quote, "Not what we excuse, but what we justify." It showed up on timelines in newsletters, and eventually briefings on Capitol Hill. But Maya, she kept her head down. She wasn't trying to become a symbol. She was trying to fix a system. Still, the message had rippled too far to stop. A public service law professor wrote a column titled, "When Oversight Learns to Whisper." A podcast host called her the quiet earthquake we didn't see coming. And ordinary people, postal workers, public nurses, teachers, janitors, told their own versions. Times they were told to sit down, to wait, to be silent. One comment. Under the video read, "I've been an intern twice and I never had the courage to speak up. This story reminded me it's not too late to start." Another, "My mother cleaned city offices for 20 years. She used to say the trash always knew, the truth before the boardroom did. They called it a movement. Maya didn't, she just called it work. The kind that doesn't need a spotlight, just persistence." Policy groups requested her consultation. University panels invited her to speak. She said no to most of them because she wasn't finished yet. There were still places where silence sat heavy, still names buried in backlogs, still people waiting to be believed. Maya started something, but more importantly, she left something behind, a template, a map. Not for how to confront loud injustice, but how to dismantle quiet bias. One hallway at a time, one folder at a time. 1. Question at the right moment in the right room, with just enough courage not to sit back down. Because culture doesn't shift when we shout it into shape. It shifts when enough people look at the same broken thing and stop pretending it works. The courthouse steps looked different that morning. Not newer, not brighter, just clearer. Like something old had been scrubbed away, and the stone underneath was finally showing its real face. Maya stood at the top step. No folder in hand, no plan on her lips. Just one final breath before stepping into the day as someone no longer undercover. Below her, A few familiar faces gathered. Enoch, leaning on his mop cart, not smiling, just watching. Eliza, holding a notepad and a hopeful look, and a little girl, must have been 6 or 7, clutching her mother's hand. The girl looked up. Big eyes, no fear, just curiosity. "Mum," she whispered, "is that the lady who changed the rules?" Her mother knelt down beside her, smoothed her hair back. "No, baby," she said. "That's the woman who reminded them the rules were for all of us." Maya heard it, didn't flinch, but something in her shoulders relaxed, just slightly. A news crew pulled up late, too late. The story was already walking down the steps. No podium. No flashbulbs, just footsteps that echoed softer than the moment deserved, because power, the real kind, doesn't walk loud. It walks sure. It listens. It waits for its moment, then moves without asking permission. Maya passed the little girl, paused, kneeled. Slightly, just enough to meet her gaze. "You can sit anywhere you belong," she said, "even if someone tells you otherwise." Then stood, walked forward. The girl's eyes followed her like sunlight through glass. Inside, the building waited. Same doors, but the silence inside was different now. It wasn't heavy, it wasn't afraid, it was ready. And sometimes that's all change needs. Not applause, not headlines, just a woman who never raised her voice and never had to. If you watched this far, you already know this wasn't just a story. It was a mirror, a reflection of the rooms we sit in, the voices we overlook, and the changes waiting in the quiet corners of our world. Maya didn't walk in with applause. She walked in with intention, and when she left, the silence didn't follow her out. It stayed. It stayed in policies rewritten, in voices rediscovered, in the little girl watching from the steps, believing she could belong. So if you feel moved, by truth, by justice, by the idea that power can look like patience, don't let it end here. Share this story, talk about it, act on it, because sometimes the loudest revolution starts with a whisper, and maybe, just maybe, it starts with you.